Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you as always for stopping by. Let me start with some macro thoughts. This is from Joe Wiesenthal, the stalwart on Twitter. The market continues to move inverse to Trump's approval rating, which is quite an interesting outcome. Home thoughts: magical view of Mount Kilimanjaro at Amboseli National Park, Iramito Gate. This is from Stella Maris Mega, and indeed it's a fantastic photograph. It took me back to The Snows of Kilimanjaro, which was written by Ernest Hemingway. He says Kilimanjaro is a snow-covered mountain, 19,710 feet high, and is said to be the highest mountain in Africa. Its western summit is called the Masai Ngaje Gai, the House of God. Close to the western summit there is a dried and frozen carcass of a leopard. No one has explained what the leopard was seeking at that altitude. This is a photograph of the snow peaks of Mount Kilimanjaro taken by myself aboard a Kenya Airways flight. From that book, and that was the end of the beginning of that, which I thought was quite clever. Finally, home thoughts: with the credit card, the public is poured into the computer. Marshall and Eric McLuhan. Political reflections: Narendra Modi is seen in this photograph visiting the Sultan Qaboos Grand Mosque in Muscat, which is the biggest mosque in Oman. Muscat and Sultan Qaboos were interlocutors between Iran and the US administration under President Obama, but he's now very ill. The Autocrat's Achilles heel, foreign affairs. Both Putin and Xi could be making a strategic error. They are staking their country's futures and international trajectories on one thing: themselves. Great power competition is back. Russia and China, two great powers with autocrats at their helms, are actively testing the durability of the international order as the West seemingly retreats. Vladimir Putin, unfazed by Western sanctions, not only led a disinformation campaign in Western democracies to disrupt major elections, but continues to maintain Russia's occupation of Crimea and the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine. Xi Jinping, meanwhile, is projecting China's military power into the South China Sea and its economic might across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Both countries also seek to influence democratic states through the use of sharp power. Aware of Russia and China's growing reach, the Trump administration made the right decision to identify the two nations as US competitors in its recently released National Security Strategy and National Defense Strategy. For the first time since September 2001, greater power competition rather than global terrorism is considered the number one priority for US national security. Saying there seem to be no effective checks to Putin and Xi's growing ambitions. Both leaders, however, could be making a strategic error. They are staking their country's futures and international trajectories on one thing: themselves. Saying they've taken steps to consolidate their personal control on power. This may work as a stabilizing mechanism in the short term, but in the long term can exacerbate inherent domestic tensions that could eventually undermine their rules. August last year, I was writing about how, far from being in a unipolar world, we have entered a bipolar or even a tripolar world: US, China, and Russia. To the point about these islands, artificial islands. Look at this digital globe satellite imagery unveils Chinese military fortresses in the Spratly Islands. This is what I wrote again in August last year. China has established control over the South China Sea It has created artificial islands, then militarized those artificial islands across the South China Sea. And that apart from a few half-hearted and timid FONOPs, they've essentially established control. Kim Jong-un praises sincere, impressive South Korea. That goes back to the article I wrote over the weekend about where I was saying I was transfixed by the events unfolding in Pyeongchang, where South Korea was hosting the Winter Olympics. I was referring to Kim Jong-un, who's been supreme leader since 2011, has advanced his country's nuclear deterrent by a mile in that period, and thumbed his nose at President Trump. Kim Jong-un unleashed his secret weapon on the world, that secret weapon being his sister, Kim Yo-jong, who evidently bamboozled South Korea's President Moon, otherwise known as Moon River. I wish I could see you in Pyongyang at an early date, Miss Kim Yo-jong told Mr. Moon. And I was saying that Kim Jong-un has accelerated Pyongyang's nuclear program, notwithstanding US chatter of a bloody nose strike. What is clear, Kim has an effective deterrent now. In his mind, I'm sure he was in an existential race against time to avoid the fate he saw meted out on Saddam Hussein and Colonel Gaddafi. I said, I am not in a position to pronounce on the repugnance of the regime in Pyongyang, and by most accounts it has been a repugnant one with respect to its citizens, who at times appear to be just bit players on a giant and grandiose canvas where the Kims have, a la William Randolph Hearst, created their cinema. At a geopolitical level, we have to see things for what they are. The US has been triangulated. Kim has his nuclear deterrence. His sister is now playing the soft power game. Quoted Lao Tzu, water is fluid, soft and yielding, but water will wear away rock which is rigid and cannot yield. As a rule, whatever is fluid, soft and yielding will overcome whatever is rigid and hard. This is another paradox. What is soft is strong. South Korea is said to be peeled off and going by his puppy dog smiles. President Moon River will be in Pyongyang before you can pronounce Kim Yo-jong correctly. Russia always had their back. China was never interested in bringing him to heel. After all, he is the buffer state between China and more than 30,000 soldiers parked on their doorstep in South Korea. What we saw unfold in Pyeongchang marks a significant and iconic moment for the Mount Paektu bloodline, a three-generation lineage of North Korean leadership descended from the country's first leader, Kim Il-sung. This is a photograph of the crater atop Mount Paektu, North Korea, and here the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is seen visiting Mount Paektu. Let's move on to international markets. The US 10-year yield jumped to a 4-year high of 2.89% on Monday. This goes back to an article I wrote in September 2016, Mirrors on the Ceiling, the Pink Champagne on Ice. I said then, if volatility spikes, positions are going to be reduced en masse, or to put it another way, and to borrow the lyrics from the Eagles' Hotel California, mirrors on the ceiling, the pink champagne on ice, and she said, we are all just prisoners here of our own device. Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the nightman, we are programmed to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. The euro is at 123.08, dollar index edging back towards the 90 level, Japanese yen 108.31, that's strengthening again towards that key level around the 107.90, 108 level. Swiss franc 0.9385, the pound 138.50, the Aussie, which has had a strong rebound, 0.7867, India rupee 64.225, South Korean won 1082.50, Brazilian real 329.54, Egyptian pound 17.7165, and the rand, which I think will rally sharply on the announcement of Zuma's departure finally, is at 11.9332. Put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. Let's see how we behave as we dip towards 90. Euro dollar back at 123, and you've got to keep an eye on Bund spreads. Platform versus pipeline strategy was an interesting article in HBR. Back in 2007, the 5 major mobile phone manufacturers, Nokia, Samsung, Motorola, Sony, Ericsson and LG, collectively controlled 90% of the industry's global profits. That year, Apple's iPhone burst onto the scene and began gobbling up market share. By 2015, the iPhone single-handedly generated 92% of global profits, while all but one of the former incumbents made no profit at all. How can we explain the iPhone's rapid domination of its industry, and how can we explain its competitors' free fall? Nokia and the others had classic strategic advantages that should have protected them: strong product differentiation, trusted brands, leading operating systems, excellent logistics, protective regulation, huge R&D budgets, and massive scale. For the most part, those firms looked stable, profitable, and well entrenched. Certainly, the iPhone had an innovative design and novel capabilities. But in 2007, Apple was a weak, non-threatening player, surrounded by 800-pound gorillas. It had less than 4% of market share in desktop operating systems, and none at all in mobile phones. As we'll explain, Apple overran the incumbents by exploiting the power of platforms and leveraging the new rules of strategy they gave rise to. Platform businesses bring together producers and consumers in high-value exchanges. Their chief assets are information and interactions, which together are also the source of the value they create and their competitive advantage. Talking about network effects, which is central to platform strategy. It's a very interesting article, well worth reading. As Apple demonstrates, firms needn't be only a pipeline or a platform, they can be both. While plenty of pure pipeline businesses are still highly competitive, when platforms enter the same marketplace, the platforms virtually always win. That's why pipeline giants such as Walmart, Nike, John Deere and GE are all scrambling to incorporate platforms onto their models. Let's take a look at the commodity markets. The gold price is at 13.27. We rallied from 12.41 to around 13.50. We came back and we're now just trying to refine the base here. Crude oil, $59.43 last. Big bounce yesterday at the beginning of the day, I think mostly on the news of the Israeli plane being shot down. Sub-Saharan Africa, this is lunch by Lake Naru Ballet, Lake Victoria, this is Lemni Sise. ANC, according to the Financial Times, will order President Zuma to resign. The National Executive Committee decided to sack Mr. Zuma after a marathon 13-hour meeting into the early hours of Tuesday that capped weeks of intrigue and political paralysis as the president resisted pressure from party leaders to stand aside. As the talks dragged on, Mr. Ramaphosa visited Mr. Zuma at his official residence in Pretoria just before midnight on Monday. An official letter confirming the sacking could be sent to Mr. Zuma later on Tuesday. An ANC spokesperson could not be reached for comment. No party member has resisted an order by the NEC to leave a government post. Becky resigned as president in 2008 after being told to step down by the NEC. Mr. Zuma could refuse to heed the NEC because its decisions are not legally binding. Should he do so, the ANC would be forced to remove him through Parliament, which elects the president, prolonging the political crisis. The ANC would be the major loser if the matter goes to a no-confidence vote. It will smack of deep division, a party unable to exert internal discipline, and will reflect poorly on Ramaphosa's ability to strike a deal directly with Zuma. He is not going to start getting scared by the NEC given the stakes here. 18th of December last year, I wrote a piece, Will It Be 1994 All Over Again? I said President Zuma has laughed, his chuckle should be trademarked, in the face of his adversaries like a political sorcerer. Or the Teflon Don has shrugged off all sorts of scandal. If Ramaphosa, and it looks, the if is not, it's not if, it's when. If, I said, Ramaphosa succeeds in wresting the leadership of the ANC, South African asset prices will enter the sweetest of sweet spots. Global investors will buy the brand by the bucket load, and we could see a further meaningful rally in the order of 10% towards 12. That was at that moment. I think we're going to 11 now. I said we can all remember the moment when Nelson Mandela came out of prison blinking in the sunlight and assumed leadership. And I said Ramaphosa could well be the ignition for returning South Africa to that incredible moment full of promise. Malema says we don't want Zuma, we don't want Cyril, we don't want the ANC, dissolve parliament, fresh elections. South African all shares minus 5.54% this year. Dollar versus Rand, the new target is 11, is last trading at 11.93. Gupta banker, Bank of Baroda, has quit South Africa, said it would shut its doors in SA at the end of March as part of a plan to rationalize its branches in international markets. The business in South Africa is not very significant and will not have any major impact on the financials of the bank, parent company said in an email response to Reuters. September last year, I wrote an article about South Africa and the reputational risk and the cautionary tale. And I said what this scenario informs us is that clearly global businesses have insufficient oversight over what have become far-flung operations, and the bottom line has blinded headquarters to what is going on the ground. I like this, waking up in the world, Egyptian Sahara, this is from Land Rover. Nigerian all shares plus 11.75% so far this year. Ghana's economy, the $45 billion economy, is the 7th biggest in sub-Saharan Africa and will probably expand 8.3% this year, the fastest growth rate on the continent. Ghana will remeasure economic output using 2013 prices instead of 2006 previously, and the basket of activities used to value the economy is being expanded due to new industries that have come on since 2006. Agency will release the revised GDP and economic growth figures for 2014 to 2017 on May 23rd, and the data points to a bigger economy than previously estimated. We have discovered new activities in the areas of oil and gas, information and communication technology, construction and education. While oil and gas activity was part of recent estimates, the data has improved and also downstream activity has expanded. In ICT, voice used to dominate, but these days there's a lot of data use. Information on household economic activity has also improved. Ghana Stock Exchange is the world's best. This year it's up 26.44%. Acacia Mining has scrapped its 2017 dividend after core earnings fell by more than half because of a ban on unprocessed mineral exports in Tanzania. Company is majority owned by Barrick Gold, said full-year earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization fell 38% after taking a $644 million impairment charge. Tanzanian president pledges to make the country more investment-friendly, according to Zinwa. In 2018, the government will continue taking efforts aimed at making the country more conducive to both local and foreign investments, in a statement by the Directorate of Presidential Communication at State House in Dar es Salaam. This is a gorgeous golden hour in Dar es Salaam, photo taken by Sarah Jabril on Instagram. It was indeed a pleasure catching up yesterday with the Base Resources and Base Titanium Managing Director Tim Carstens. Base, of course, announced the acquisition of the Toliara Sands project in Madagascar during December. They called it a transformational acquisition for Base Resources, represents a significant step in execution of the company's strategic plan. Base also released its quarterly report for Q4 2017 on January the 11th. To take a look at that. If you're interested in an update on the Kwale Mines operations, production data, market update, and what is an excellent safety record. Base raised 100 million Australian dollars in order to complete that Toliara Heavy Minerals project. I also paid a visit to the De La Rue facility yesterday, and it was indeed an eye-opener. Unfortunately, I cannot share with you the pallets and pallets of cash. It was because it's a little bit like Fort Knox. Warning signs flash for the Kenyan shilling as it climbs amid the crisis. The Kenya shilling rose 0.9% last week to 100.8, a fifth straight week of gains, best streak since 2015. It's near its strongest level since June 2016. That rise has sent the dollar's 14-day relative strength index versus the shilling plunging to 6.5, its lowest in more than a decade, and well below the level of 30 that some technical traders see as a signal it's oversold. Equities have more or less risen steadily since Kenya's election rerun in October, even though the opposition has refused to accept defeat. On January 30, it held a mock ceremony to swear in its leader, Raila Odinga, as the people's president, which the administration of President Kenyatta said was illegal. It retaliated by arresting opposition officials and closing down some television channels. The media crackdown, I believe, will be ignored because the markets have discounted the opposition's asymmetric strategy to close to zero. Kenya's Eurobonds have also proved resilient, thanks in part to investors craving the higher yields that emerging markets offer. While Kenya's 2024 dollar yields have risen around 60 basis points since early January, its spread over US Treasuries, which have more than halved since mid-2016, is still near all-time lows, and that's why I've been bullish about the government issuing the Eurobond into that market. I was talking on the 5th of February about the MB index being at 258 basis points, the tightest since mid-2014. And I was sounding a note of caution when I said, how long this lasts is anybody's guess. The emerging frontier market borrowers surely need to get their skates on, pull the trigger real quick on any borrowing that they had been considering for this year. Press release, KRA, said their revenue was up 9.6% against a backdrop of a depressed business environment. Unga spiked 28.21% yesterday to close at 37.50, and it's now up 29.31% year to date. This cautionary announcement, which was issued on the 12th, refers. The Kenya shilling is trading at 101.10. Nairobi All Share fell sharply yesterday, but it's up 3.84% year to date. The NSE 20 is up 0.47% year to date. And finally, Al Jazeera's listening post was headlined, "Who decides what is news in Kenya?" That link is at the bottom of Rich Wrap-Ups, which is the last item on the